Aloha students, and welcome to the lecture on Chapter 6. In Chapter 6 we're talking about um, making managerial decisions based on accounting information. So we'll be looking at a series of typical decisions that management might have to make and how they can use accounting information to help make those decisions. Okay, first though, let's look at um, contribution margin income statements. And contribution margin income statements, as we saw in a previous chapter, is just a different formatting from the traditional income statements that we've seen in the past in your accounting or management 510, MBA 510 classes. So it starts off with the sales revenue, just as the traditional income statement does. But in this case, instead of subtracting cost of goods sold to get gross profit and all that, we subtract all of our variable costs to get contribution margin, then we subtract all of our fixed costs to get net income. Okay, so it's the same information as a traditional income statement. It's just the formatting, the structure is different. And we're going to be using this contribution margin format of income statement in this chapter to look at those managerial decisions. Here you can see the comparison of the contribution margin approach on the right hand side here and the traditional income statement that you can see on the left hand side. So again, the traditional is sales less your cost of goods sold equals gross margin, and then you subtract operating expenses to get net income. Notice it's the same net income because it's the same information, just structured differently. Okay, so we'll now take a look at making managerial decisions based on accounting information. And the approach that we take for this is differential analysis. Differential analysis basically means looking at the differences between two different alternatives to determine which of the alternatives is the best one. And in this type of analysis, we only look at the differences. So what are the differences that occur by choosing one alternative over another? So we're not looking at the total costs, for example. We're just looking at the differential or difference, how much more cost there will be, not how much total cost there's going to be. Here's a list of some typical differential analysis that we can use accounting information for. So making pricing decisions, accepting or rejecting a special order, decide whether to make a product or a part of a product that you're currently producing, or should we just buy those parts from somebody else, adding or eliminating product segments or customers or a part of your business, and then processing or selling joint products. So that's the case where you have a single process up until a certain point, and then after that point, there's several products that come out of that process. Okay, so we'll explain all of these different applications or types of decisions individually. Excuse me, the concept of relevant costs is kind of simple, actually. It's just the cost that is pertinent to the decision that you're trying to make. And remember, we're looking at differential analysis. So if something doesn't change, is not different between the two alternatives, that's not relevant because it's the same thing for either alternative. So no sense that into the analysis if it's exactly the same for both alternatives or both options. So again, we're looking only at the differences, okay? And things that don't change are not relevant to the decision, and those are left out, okay? Another terminology, another thing that is not relevant to decision making is sunk cost. A sunk cost is a cost that you've incurred in the past. You can't change that cost. You can't do anything about that cost. So it's not relevant at all for making a decision, because decisions are about future things. So sunk costs are things that already happened and you can't change that. Okay, so example they give is that you bought an automobile that cost $10,000 2 years ago. That $10,000 is gone. It's a sunk cost, because no matter what you do with that car from this point on, it still had cost you $10,000. So that's not relevant to the decision. So if the decision is, should we drive the car, leave it in our garage, trade it, sell it, that $10,000 doesn't matter. That's not part of the decision. It's a sunk cost. Okay? And we're only looking at costs from this point forward into the future, not looking back at past costs. Okay, so sunk cost, past cost, not relevant for decision making, because you can't do anything about those already. They're gone. Okay, so you remember the concept of fixed costs, and those were costs that did not change with changes in volume. There's two kinds of fixed cost. One type of fixed costs are committed fixed costs. So these are costs that can't be reduced. Okay, so fixed costs are there. Nothing can be done to change that. So for example, depreciation on a building. The building is there, okay, and it's going to depreciate. Nothing we can do. There's no decision that we can make that's going to make that depreciation go away. I guess other than just destroying the building, but for all practical purposes, these are costs that you can't change, you can't decide to get rid of. On the other hand, discretionary fixed costs are costs that are fixed. In other words, they don't change with volume, but you can get rid of those. For example, advertising. If you decide to put $1,000 into advertising your products, regardless of how many products you make and sell, that $1,000 is not going to change. It's still going to be $1,000 that you're spending. So it's a fixed cost. However, it's discretionary because you can get rid of the whole thing. You can decide not to advertise and you can wipe out that fixed cost. That's a discretionary fixed cost. The reason that's important is in the analyses we're going to be doing in this chapter, we're going to use that concept of which fixed costs are committed. In other words, we're stuck with it and we can't get rid of it. Which fixed costs are discretionary? Which ones can we get rid of? Okay, another concept, terminology, is the concept of opportunity cost. An opportunity cost is something you're giving up by choosing a different alternative. And the example I give is by sitting down and listening to this lecture. And let's say this lecture is going to take an hour. Okay, you're giving up the ability to, let's say, work at McDonald's for this hour, and you could make $10 an hour, okay, instead of sitting here listening to this lecture. So why are you giving up the opportunity to earn $10 at McDonald's for an hour instead of listening to this lecture? That's an opportunity cost. You're giving up the potential earnings at McDonald's because you're selecting this instead as an alternative. Okay. Question becomes, why are you willing to give up $10 for the hour that you could have made at McDonald's? Well, opportunity costs are given up because the alternative has more potential earnings or more potential positive cash inflow for in the future. Okay, so you're giving up $10 by working at McDonald's because you know that by sitting in this or listening to this lecture, that hour is going to do more good for you in the long run. Okay, that's an opportunity cost. Okay. Sometimes we need to look at opportunity cost in making certain decisions because you're sacrificing a current revenue in order to gain more revenues in the future. So as we look at each of these decisions that we're going to be analyzing, we'll see how opportunity costs are going to affect those decisions. Okay, so the first decision that we're going to analyze is pricing decisions. Okay, so pricing decisions are decisions as to what is the price that we should be charging for a product that maximizes income. And obviously, as a for-profit company, that's the objective, is to maximize income. Another thing to keep in mind in pricing decisions are fixed costs almost always are not going to be changed by pricing decisions. So in the analysis that we're going to be doing, we're going to be primarily ignoring fixed costs because they're not going to change regardless of what alternative we choose. So we're assuming the fixed costs are committed. They're not going to change at all. So what we're going to be looking at in making these pricing decisions is the contribution margin. Again, if you remember the first contribution margin income statement that we talked about in the beginning of the chapter, that was your sales minus your variable cost equals contribution margin. That's primarily the only thing we're going to be looking at when we look at making pricing decisions. Okay, so here's an example. So this company is, they're going to make a new stuffed animal, and marketing analysis, so through surveys, market research, these are the demands or the sales, sorry, that they could make at various price points. So they could sell 10,000 units if the price was $10 a unit. They could sell 13,000 units if the price was $9 a unit. They could sell 16,000 at $8 per unit, and they could sell 20,000 units at $7 per unit. Okay, how they get these numbers is a function of marketing. Okay, so market research indicates that those are the number of units they could sell at various prices. Okay, so let's assume the unit variable cost. So for each stuffed animal, it costs $4 of variable costs. And there's no new fixed costs. So fixed costs are not going to change at any of those volumes. So it's the same fixed cost all the way across. So we're going to end up ignoring fixed costs because they don't change, and it's the same amount over all of the various alternatives. Okay, so given this information, what's the proper price that they should charge? And we're going to charge the price that results in the highest total contribution margin. Okay, so again, first step is to figure out what is the contribution margin per unit. And again, contribution margin is the selling price minus variable cost. And we're looking at this on a per unit basis first. Okay, so remember the $10 per unit. If we sold it for 10, and notice the variable cost doesn't change. It still cost us $4 to make the product regardless of how many we sell. It's going to cost $4 each. Okay, so you can make $6 per unit if we sell it for 10. We can make $5 per unit if we sell it for 9, etc. So that's the unit contribution margin. Okay, so you would think you would choose the one where you can make the most per unit, but remember, the demand is different at the different sales points. So again, we can make $6 each if we sold it at 10 bucks. We could sell 10,000 units at that sales price, giving us a total contribution margin of 60,000. On the other hand, if we sold it at $9, our contribution margin per unit is $5 each. We could sell 13,000 of them though at that price, giving us total contribution margin of 65,000. So we do that for each layer at each sales price. to get the total contribution margin, and we choose the alternative that gives us the highest total contribution margin, which in this case is the $9 selling price. Okay. Again, how they get these numbers for demand based on different prices is beyond the scope of this course, because that's a marketing thing, and you learned or will learn that process when you get into the marketing class in the MBA program. Okay, so that's a pricing decision. And again, notice that we did not take into account fixed cost. Again, because fixed cost is the same number for all of the different alternatives, so it's irrelevant to our decision. Okay, we only look at the things that change, in this case, the unit price. Okay, so again, choose the price point that gives us the highest total contribution margin. Okay, the next analysis is for special orders. Okay, a special order is when a company has the opportunity to sell its product at a one-shot deal kind of a thing. Usually it's at higher volume, and usually it's at a lower price than their normal cost. So let's say you're in business to sell widgets, okay? And a new customer comes along and says, I'll order a lot of widgets from you if you give us a special price that's lower than your normal selling price. Okay, so this decision, special order decision, then is whether to accept those kinds of special orders or not. Okay, again, notice that if we accept the special order or whether we reject the special order, fixed costs are going to be not changed at all. They're fixed. So even if we accept the special order, the fixed costs will not go up. So again, because we're looking at incremental differences or changes, if the fixed cost is the same under both alternatives, we ignore it because it's not relevant to the decision making at hand. Okay, so here's an example of a special order. So this company makes stuffed bears, and they've got enough capacity to consider a special order. Okay, the reason that this capacity is important is if a company didn't have enough capacity or enough room to make enough of their product for the special order, they would have to take away some of the sales from their current customers in order to fill the order for the special customer. And because the price is almost always, well, not almost always lower in a special order than the regular customer or the regular products that they're selling now, that doesn't make sense to give up the regular priced sales in order to accept a special order at a lower price. This only works, or special orders should only be accepted if there's adequate capacity. So if they have enough room to make those special order quantities without cannibalizing their current sales. Okay, so in other words, so these guys, they do have enough capacity to accommodate or to make this 100,000 bears. Okay, the retailer, excuse me, offers $18 per bear. So they say, we'll buy 100,000 bears from you at $18 each. So let's see whether Jones Company should accept this order or not. Okay, so looking at the cost information, and this is a unit cost, so per bear, you can see there's $8 worth of direct materials in there. There's $6 worth of direct labor in each bear. And then the variable overhead is $2. Variable overhead means overhead that does increase or decrease, okay, with changes in volume. And then fixed overhead. So this overhead doesn't change no matter how much they increase the volumes that they make. This overhead in total is still gonna be there, okay? So that fixed overhead is $2 million. This Jones company has a capacity of 500,000 bears, okay? That's how you get this $4 per unit. Okay, they total for $2 million, and right now they're making 500,000 bears. Gives us a $4 per unit cost. Jones normally sells the bears for an average price of $30 a bear. Okay, so their normal selling price is $30. Looking at the unit cost here, looks like the cost to make each bear is $20. So you say, hey, wait a minute. If the customer is offering $18 per bear, if it's costing them $20 each to make them, sounds like we should reject that special order. That doesn't make sense. Accepting a price of $20, sales price of $20 when it cost us, $18 when it cost us $20, sounds like we'll lose $2 per bear. That doesn't make any sense. However, let's take a closer look at that. Okay, notice the variable cost portion is $16. The $8 direct materials, the $6 direct labor, and the $2 variable overhead. So the total cost is total variable cost is $16. That fixed cost, that $4 that was charged to each bear, that's an allocated cost. Okay, in total, that $2 million is not going to change at all. Okay, so we don't include the fixed portion of the overhead in our analysis because, again, it does not change regardless of what decision we're making. It's still going to be in total $2 million. So we only look at the variable costs in making this decision. So if it cost us $16 each, so again, you can think of this total unit variable cost as the additional cost that will be incurred in making an extra bear. Okay, not the $4 because that's going to be there no matter what. So the only costs that go up for each bear that we make are the variable cost. That is $16. If we sell it for $18, we'll make $2 on each bear. So that 100,000 units that the special order customer wants to buy, 100,000 of those times $2 each, we can make an additional $200,000 if we accept the order. Okay, so again, the key point here is what is the costs that are really going to go up? Those are only the variable costs. So that's the only thing that we consider in our decision. Before we get into the next thing though, okay, so this is the accounting decision by the numbers. However, there may be some qualitative or non-numeric considerations. One of those, for example, is you're selling these bears to your regular customers for $30 each. What if your current customers, these are all retail stores, find out that you're giving somebody a special price of $18? Okay, they're going to want, your current customers, they're going to want that price as well. They're going to say, hey, how come you charge us $30 and you only charge them $18 to buy your bears? So one of the qualitative considerations is, will that hurt your current business if your current customers find out about the special order? Which is why most of the time special orders are only accepted if they're from a customer who's not currently in your current market. So for example, if a company in China requested a special order and your current customer base is all Hawaii companies, then it might be okay to accept the special order because the Hawaii companies won't find out about the special price you gave to the Chinese company. On the other hand, if the customer that's requesting the special order is on Oahu, there is a chance that your current customers will find out about that special price that you gave the special order customers. So that might not be a good idea. Even though you could make money from the special order, you might lose a lot of your current customers because they're mad because you gave somebody else a special order price. Okay, so the numbers tell us one thing, but there are other qualitative factors you got to consider as well. Okay. Okay, another decision that is sometimes made is whether we should eliminate, and it says adding or eliminating a product, but this type of analysis is almost done for eliminating a segment of their business or eliminating a product. Okay, so it looks like a product or a segment or a department or a store, for example, is losing money. But we have to do an analysis here just to make sure that we're looking at the right numbers. Okay, so the concept here, similar to those fixed cost things that we saw earlier, avoidable and unavoidable costs. Avoidable costs are costs that go away if you eliminate a product or a segment of the business. Okay. Unavoidable costs are costs that even if you eliminated something, certain costs will continue to be there. Okay. So you only look at the avoidable costs basically, okay, when we're doing this kind of decision. And let's look at an example. Okay, so this Ray's department store, they're considering eliminating the hardware department. Okay, so the hardware, I wish they would have put this on a table. It's easier to see, but revenues from hardware is $200,000. Cost of goods sold is 160. Okay, so that means their contribution margin is $40,000. Salaries are $20,000. And if they got rid of this hardware department, those salaries would go away, of course, because if there's no hardware department, the people that worked in the hardware department would not be needed. The hardware department's allocated portion of the store overhead is $45,000. And that would continue regardless of the decision. So let me just see, hold on, if, yeah, they have the numbers. Okay, so that $45,000 allocation of overhead, so this is overheads cost of the store as a whole that's charged to each department, and $45,000 of that total overhead is charged to hardware. Okay, so looking at, just for now, look at this keep column. This is what's happening right now. The revenues are $20,000. I'm sorry, $200,000. The variable cost was 160, so that contribution margin of 40. And then the costs, fixed costs, were the $20,000 in the salaries and $45,000 of the allocated fixed cost. Yeah. So it looks like that department has a $25,000 loss. Okay. So the decision is, should we keep that department going, hardware department that's losing $25,000, or should we close it? We have to look at what happens to each line item if we closed in this case, hardware department. So if we close the hardware department, those $200,000 of sales revenue, that would all go away because they wouldn't have anything to sell. But then likewise, the cost of goods sold, the variable cost, that'll go away as well because we wouldn't have to buy any inventory if we're not going to sell any. Okay, so contribution margin 0. Of this $65,000, the $20,000 of salaries, well, if we close the department, that'll go away. But then that $45,000 store overhead that gets charged to the hardware department, even if we got rid of that hardware department, that cost is still gonna be there. Okay, this might be the allocation of the rent for the whole store. Okay, hardware got charged a certain amount for the rent, for the utilities, for the store manager's salary. So those costs that were charged to the hardware department now has to be spread out to other departments. So the store manager's salary, that's going to have to now be spread out to the remaining departments. So this 45 is going to have to be absorbed by the other departments. It's not going to go away. It's still going to be there. Just going to have to be absorbed or eaten up by the other departments. So that will still stay there. So if we had that 45,000 still there, if we close the hardware department, we'd actually lose that $45,000 because we still have that cost there. We would have no revenues to offset that. Okay, so we look at the differences between keeping and closing, and we see by closing the department, we would lose an additional $20,000. Okay, so if we keep the department, we lose $25,000. If we close the department, we would lose $45,000. We'd lose more. So the decision is, oh, we better keep the hardware department, okay, and not close it. Okay, some qualitative non-accounting factors. Okay, so the accounting numbers say, let's keep the hardware department. Let's not close it because we'll lose less money than if we did close it. However, if we could use that space in the hardware department to sell another product that makes more money, or we can expand another department into the space formerly occupied by the hardware department, and that department that's expanding has a higher contribution margin, then we should get rid of the hardware department and then expand the other, either a new department or expand the existing departments to cover that space. Okay, so you got to look at that as well. Okay. Okay, the concept of a joint product. Okay, so a joint product is when you have a common process up to a certain point, and then at that point, called the split off point, then it's different products are processed separately, okay, to create other products. So typical example of this is products derived from pigs. Okay, there's certain common costs that occur up front in order to get that pig ready for different products. Okay, and the different products might be ham, bacon, pig's feet, so pig skin for footballs. So, I mean, there's common costs, right? They have to raise the pig, they have to slaughter the pig, they have to cut it up into pieces, and then at that point, then further different processing is done for each of the products. So for the ham, I guess they take the certain parts of the pig and do certain things to it, cure it or whatever to make ham. Bacon are different parts of the pig and they use a different process to make the bacon. The pig's feet, obviously they do something to the feet of the pig. So they have a different process. So these light green arrows here represent the different processes they need to do to get to the different products. The dark green joint costs are the common costs that's done in order to get to a point where then they can split off the product. Okay. So the question sometimes becomes, should we sell a product at this split off point, or should we process it further to become a finished product? Okay. A common example that's used for this process is furniture. especially those do-it-yourself kind of furniture where you put it together. So there's certain, there's certain costs that are upfront for making furniture. Let's assume it's wooden furniture. So they have to, chop down the trees, cut it into lumber, cut it into lumber, for example. Okay, and let's say that there's several different products. There are do-it-yourself furniture. So you've seen those where you take it home in a box and you have to put it together yourself, kind of thing. Okay. They have a product, for example, another product might be a finished table. Okay. Another product might be a luxury line of high-end products. So each of those products has a different process. Okay, once the wood is cut into lumber, then each product has a different process to get it to its particular product. So question becomes, at what point should we sell those products? Okay, so here's an example or an illustration of this concept using oil, I guess, as the main product. So crude oil. Okay, let's say crude oil. So this crude oil has to be pumped out of the ground, transported to factories. So there's some cost up front that affects all of the products. Those are again called joint costs. So, and then at a certain point called the split off point, that crude oil then is processed into oil, gasoline, chemicals. Okay, so we can sell these products as is at the split off point. Okay, or we can do some more work on them to make a different final product that we sell later. So the decision for this joint products is, do we sell products at the split off point, or like gasoline, for example, or do we do more work on them and then create a different kind of finished product that we sell later? I guess gasoline is gasoline. You don't do any further processing, so you sell it at the split off point. However, oil, you can sell it as crude oil, I guess, or something at the split off point, or you can process it more to make a more refined oil, and you can sell it later for a higher price. Okay. Okay, so let's look at an example of that. So Ames Company produces two products from a common process. So the joint cost, the cost of getting it to the split off point, are $100,000. So at that split off point, product A can be sold for $70,000 and product B can be sold for $50,000. Okay. So if we didn't want to do anything more and just wanted to sell it right now at the split off point, we could sell A for $70,000, B for $50,000. Or additional processing costs are $40,000 for product A, $20,000 for product B. So we can do more work on these two products. It'll cost us $40,000 additional costs to do more work on product A, and it'll cost us $20,000 additional work for product B. But then after you do all that work, additional work, you could sell product A for $120,000. We could sell product B for $65,000. Okay, so the question is, should we sell the products at the split off point, or should we do additional work on them and sell them later? Okay, and here's a diagram of our the process or our decision that we need to make. Okay, so again, joint costs, the upfront costs were $100,000. We could sell A at the split off point for 70,000, B at the split off point for 50,000, or we could do additional work on A that would cost us 40,000, and then we could sell it for 120. We can do another $20,000 work on product B and sell it for 65. Okay, so we're looking at, and we look at each product separately. And again, it's differential. So we're looking at the differences. Okay, so differential revenue. How much additional revenue could we get by processing it further? So we could sell it for 70 now, but we can get 50,000 more if we sell it later. That's the additional from 70 to 120. That's the additional 50,000. The cost of processing it further is 40,000. So the differential cost, it'll cost us $40,000 more to process it further. So the revenues, additional revenue is 50, additional cost is 40. So we will make an additional $10,000. Okay. Oops. On the other hand, B. Oh, shoots. Okay, we can sell it now for 50. Sell it later for 65. That's an additional $15,000. That's the differential revenue of 15,000. If it's easier for you to think of the term differential and use additional instead of differential, that's okay. If you think of it as additional revenue, additional cost, that might be easier to conceptualize or wrap your head around. So I kind of like to think of it that way as well. Rather than using the word differential, I like to use the word additional. So additional revenue and additional cost. Yeah. Okay, so the product B, you could sell it for 65 later, 50 now. That's an additional 15,000. But the processing cost was $20,000. So if you did process it for $20,000 more revenue, $20,000. So you would actually have less profit than you would have if you sold it at split off point. Okay, so this analysis tells us that we should process product A further. That way we can make $10,000 more revenue. And we should sell product B at the split off point because we don't want to sell it, process it further because we'd lose more money if we did that. Okay, so process product A further, sell B at the split off point. Okay, and that's the process or sell for process further or sell at split off point for joint products. Okay, another typical decision that needs to be made sometimes is make or buy decisions. Okay, so this is a case when a company makes a product and they make parts for their product. They make the parts for the product on their own, but the decision somebody offers to make that product for them, that particular part, and the question becomes, should the company continue to make those parts on their own, or should they just buy the parts from someone else? Okay, and that's called a make or buy decision. So in this case, let's say this company makes computer chips used in one of its products. So maybe it's a computer company and they make their own computer chips. So if you look at the current unit cost, oops, again, based on production of 20,000 chips per year, so that's their capacity, I guess. See, the direct materials for making the chip is $9 each, and notice these are unit costs, so that means each. Direct labor costs are $5 each. Variable overhead costs are $1 each. And fixed overhead costs, they're $13 each. Remember, fixed overhead costs are always allocated cost. So the total does not change. These are allocated costs that will still continue. So whether we buy the chips or make them ourselves, these costs will not go away. Fixed costs do not go away, okay? So this outside supplier says, you know what, we'll sell you 20,000 chips rather than you making those 20,000, and we'll sell them to you at a cost of $25 each. Well, it looks like, ooh, that's pretty good. They're going to sell it to us for 25. It's costing us 28 right now. Sounds like we should accept the offer. But hold on, let's look at the numbers in more detail to see if that is really the best decision. Okay, just like we saw earlier, in making this kind of decision, the fixed costs do not go away. They're gonna remain the same even if we bought the parts from the supplier or we continue to make the parts ourselves. That fixed cost is still gonna be there, still gonna be the same. So we don't consider those in making our decision. Okay, those are irrelevant to the decision. So the only costs that we have to consider are, again, our variable cost. And in our case, the variable costs are the $9 direct material, $5 direct labor, $1 variable overhead costs. Total cost, variable cost, $15. Okay, that $15 is the only thing that's going to change because, as we said, remember, the fixed overhead's not going to change. Okay, so it's really costing us $15 to make each additional unit. So we should not pay $25 to an outside supplier, okay, because it really is only costing us $15. So we should not accept the offer to buy it rather than to make it ourselves. Okay, so the key to the make or buy decision is comparing the variable cost of making the product on our own compared to the purchase price that we can get from an outside supplier. Okay. Well, I'll just go there. Okay, so, however, there are some qualitative or non-accounting numeric number type decision or considerations in this decision. So let's say that we do buy the chips from the outside supplier, but those the idle facilities, so where we used to make the chips, we could then lease that factory or whatever the facility is, we could lease that to somebody else for $250,000. Okay, should we then buy the chips and lease the factory, lease the facilities out? Okay, so remember earlier we saw that by buying the chips from someone else, we would lose $200,000. That's the $25 we pay for it versus the $15 it's costing us now per unit. Times the 20,000 units, 10 times 10, that's 200,000. So we'll lose 200,000, but if we can lease that facility out to someone else and make $250,000, then there's a $50,000 advantage to buying the part from someone else and then turning around and leasing the factory to another party. Okay, so that opportunity cost, okay, changes our decision, and it's, yes, we should then buy the parts from someone else, even if it's going to cost us more money than it currently does, because we can then lease the facilities to someone else. Okay. And yeah. Okay. But for all of these differential analyses, again, a qualitative factor is, let's say we do outsource, and that word outsource means have someone else do what we used to do ourselves and then just buy it from them. So like the make-buy decision we just saw. It might be cheaper to buy the product from an outside party / outsource it, okay? But then what happens is, and these are non-accounting, non-numeric considerations, okay, we lose quality control, okay? We lose, if we make it ourselves, we can control quality. On the other hand, if we buy the product from a third party, we don't have control over the quality of the materials. We have to depend on the supplier to control the quality. So we lose quality control by outsourcing. The other thing that we lose is if we make it ourselves, we can train the workers ourselves, and we can assure ourselves then of having better trained workers. On the other hand, and not to pick on China, but if we outsourced it to China, we're not sure of the quality of the workers who make the products. We're not sure if they're as well trained as if we train workers ourselves, okay? Another factor that's not listed on this particular slide is if we outsource it and have someone else make it and we just buy it from them, what's going to happen to all the workers that used to make the product? If we're not making the product ourselves anymore, we need those workers. So we'll have to get rid of workers. And from a public relations standpoint, from a quote unquote doing good standpoint, that's not very good to fire workers. And that's a common complaint about outsourcing is we're getting rid of American workers, replacing them with foreign workers if we outsource. So that's another consideration for the make or buy type decision is, even though it may be worth it dollar-wise to outsource things or to accept a special order, for example, okay, you have to look at other factors besides the money savings and look at things like quality, okay, a reputation of our company, those kinds of things, okay. So you have to, like this slide indicates, you have to weigh the benefits versus the costs. And it's not just the dollar benefits versus the dollar cost. You have to look at the qualitative, non-numeric factors as well in making this determination, this cost benefit analysis. Okay. And again, as this slide indicates and this scale indicates, we should only do things if the benefit of doing it outweighs the cost. Okay. And in a macro big picture sense, benefits includes not only the dollar benefits, but the other qualitative benefits as well. Okay. That's the lecture on chapter 6 for the next weekly quiz, the Zoom quiz. Let's see. My favorite drink is beer. Oh, that's a good one. Okay, my favorite drink is beer, so keep that in mind. Okay, that's chapter 6. That's the only thing we have for this week. So until next time, I'll see you then. Aloha.